Hi, I'm Claire Stringer, and I will be assisting Henry on the call today. And we are so excited to have you here with us. We have had over 500 people sign up for this call, so it's going to be really exciting, a lot of energy on the call today. And if you've ever read any of Henry's columns or reports, I can certainly understand your interest because he has a way of reading the stars that is profound, meaningful, empowering, and he is so excited to share some of that with you today on this call. For those of you who are with us on the internet now, we're using maestroconference.com, and the reason why we need to have you both on the phone and the internet is because Maestro allows us to use the phone to interact with you better, and you'll be seeing us online live through the internet today. So we're going to have that same ability to do this and to share Henry's screen and to be able to see the charts in the 6-week course as well that we'll be telling you about a little bit later, as well as having the opportunity to break you into groups so you can interact during the 6-week series with each other, work on charts, all those kind of things, share your insights. So if you have your chart with you today, you can follow along and you can see what Henry is talking about on the screen and how it applies to your own chart and how to read different aspects that he's talking about. And we've had a flood of volunteers for today's demonstration. So we picked the first 2 people who got back to us, and that will be Diane and Jackie, who will be on the call today. And time permitting, we'll also be able to take a couple volunteers. And if you want to volunteer to have your chart read, you just need to make sure that you can tell us the day you were born, the exact time you were born, and where you were born. And Henry will be able to pull up your chart. So without further ado, let's get started, and I give you Henry Seltzer.
Noticed we're still working out the technical kinks. I'm sure we'll get it down pretty soon, though. And it's great to be here with you. I'd say nice to see you, but of course I can't actually see you, at least in this format. When we're doing the class in January, we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to have different webcams on, and we'll be able to interact with each other more fully. What I'm doing today is I want to show you a little bit about what astrology is all about, what we do with it, and the idea being that we're going to turn all of you into 500 little astrologers. There's several hundred of you out there right now. We have 500 registrants for the course. So this is the way we're going to do it. And first of all, I'd like to ask how many people here can read charts. What you can do to indicate yes is press 1 on your phone. And I know that's a trick question. You may feel like, oh, well, I'm not really professional. And I'm just saying if you're comfortable with a chart, if it makes sense to you when you see a chart, we can put a chart up so that we can know what we're describing here. So here's a chart for a guy named Adrian. That's what I mean by a chart. And there's Diana's chart. We're going to be reading Diana today. So press 1 on your phone if you feel like that's something that you're familiar with. At least you have some idea of what a chart looks like, and then we'll see how many people on the call feel like they can read charts. It gives me some idea of how to pitch things. So anybody push 1? Claire, do we have a few pushes?
Yeah, actually, the hands keep going up. We are at almost 50% of people on the call say that they understand a little bit about charts.
I really feel good knowing that. Okay, well, good. So that means that you can get something out of this in terms of more detailed presentation. That's great. Well, I'd like to also begin with a couple of general remarks, and one thing I really like to start with is what is the meaning of astrology? How does astrology work? What is it? And there's a little bit of confusion about it because many times we talk about the planets as though they influence behavior, and this is just a very common metaphor or shorthand way of talking about it. But really, when you think about it, the planets don't actually influence behavior. There's been various attempts to look at a scientific way of methodology, for example, magnetic influences or rays or gravity or things of that nature. But really the physical world of hard objects moving around the sun is very different from the symbolic world of the astrological information. For example, Venus. I mean, if you have Venus in Taurus, you like to garden, that's that. And this is not something that comes from rays or magnetic fields. It's a symbolic way of looking at Venus as the goddess that she is. And just to give you an example of how that can work, I have a story for you. I was in the New York subway just recently, late at night, and trying to find my way back to Brooklyn, and I asked directions of this young couple, and they were very kind, and they gave me directions, and then it turned out to be the guy's birthday. And so I actually I pulled out my phone from my pocket and wound up doing their charts and looking at their charts. And surprisingly to me, because it's very rare, they both had not only the moon in Taurus, but they had the moon at the same degree of Taurus exactly. So this means that they're domestically coordinated with each other, the moon in the same place in the sky, moon conjunct moon in the synastry. So I went out on a limb, even though it was New York City, I went out on a limb and I said, "Oh, isn't that sweet? You guys like to garden together." And actually that was true. The woman said, "Yeah, we do have a garden." So I thought, oh, that's cool. So just to give you an example, that's one example of many, and of course you've seen it all yourselves, of how the astrology can just be so meaningful and can reveal so much about your own individual character, about the way you interact with others. And how does that work? And it's not, well, I believe at least that it's a symbolic universe. Carl Jung had a term for it, he called it synchronicity. So this is a synchronicity he defined as an acausal relationship between events, namely that there's a meaningful connection, but it's not a cause and effect relationship. And this is very important to recognize. This was what he introduced to talk about what's happening spiritually in the depths of people's unconscious and how people interact with each other in ways that go beyond just the pure physical surface layers. And that's what astrology speaks to. In fact, the further out the planets are, like the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, Chiron that we have now, Eris that we have now as well, those go to the depths of our being, to the very deep unconscious layers. And it's very interesting how that all relates. So that was one thing I wanted to say. Another thing is just to mention that, of course, the value of astrology is astrology is very helpful, in spite of the fact that it is symbolic layers. You can get quite a bit of information about it. Of course, it provides one more way of looking at your own life and your own destiny and what's happening. And you can use it in many ways. I remember a friend of mine didn't exactly ask me to look at his chart. He was very distraught because his wife had left him, and he called me. He was all upset. And I pulled up the charts, even though he hadn't really asked me about astrology, and I found that his wife was actually in the midst of a huge Uranus transit, and so it made sense to me that she was like taking a sudden leap to something else and exploring different things. It's sudden departures, sudden insights, Uranus. And so I was able to tell him that, there's a timing associated with that, of course, and I was able to tell him, well, in a few months, things will be different. And sure enough, she did come back after a few months, and it was nice to have that, a little bit of an assurance to be able to tell him, well, there's a good chance, looking at it from an astrological point of view, that this could be a temporary thing with her. So anyway, I just wanted to mention things like that, and then I wanted to also look at charts. And let's get started. Let's get into some charts. So is Diana on the call? I think you were supposed to be on the call, we heard. Claire, is that? You could press 1 to indicate that you're here.
Diana, you have the mic now.
Hi, Diana.
Hi.
Oh, that's great. You're here. So I take it that you have some experience with astrology. You know a little bit about your chart.
I do, yeah.
And you volunteered and wanted to put your chart up here. You're such a go-getter, as indicated by not only is your sun in Aries, and I'm going to indicate with the mouse, I think you guys can see this, that the sun and the moon close together in Aries, a new moon baby you are, with the moon just past the sun. In fact, it takes 2 hours for the moon to move 1 degree like that. So 2 hours before your birth, here was the new moon just exact. And this is a very potent chart to have all this fire, your fire sign rising. I think you said sometimes you were told Virgo, but you're actually a Leo rising as far as I can tell. doing the research that I did. And this new moon kind of personality that you have is a very strong Aries. You're very much a go-getter. You've got to do it yourself. You don't like to, somebody's driving, you don't want to stop and ask for directions. No, we'll figure this out. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And the other thing being that you've got this strong Uranus. See, Uranus is at 4 degrees of a fire sign down here, and that's 4 degrees and a half. And then here's 4 degrees and a half also your sun degree. So it's a very, very close trine to Uranus. Now this is great for astrology. So that means you can have a lot of insights. It also means that you had a fairly eclectic home background growing up, because we find that actually these planets, both Jupiter and Uranus in your 4th house, which is home and family, tells me that you may well have moved a lot when you were young, or certainly there was an exciting atmosphere intellectually when you were growing up.
Yeah, I moved a lot. That's correct.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting too that actually Jupiter is 2.5 degrees before the nadir, but we put it in the 4th house in the software as an option. This is the software I created, TimePassages. And we do that because it's on the angle, it's a 4th house. It's conjunct the 4th house cusp, it's a 4th house element. So that's the way we do that. The other thing to talk about, you have a dog. The other thing to mention in your chart, because we want to talk, when we're doing the charts today, we want to talk about strengths and weaknesses and goals. So what I noticed, and this is something that you may have tuned into, I don't know, do you know much about Chiron, Diana?
No, I don't know anything about Chiron. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, sure. So Chiron I work with quite a bit. It's very characteristic. And you have a very strong Chiron in your chart. It's close to the top of the chart in the upper regions here. It's in the 10th house. And this means that as far as where you have a kind of a personal wound, it comes in with authority. So what I typically see with this is that there's been an authority in your life that you didn't always feel comfortable with, so that you're always suspicious of authority as you've grown up, and as you get into your, I guess you're still fairly young, but as you get into your 30s here, you recognize that that's just the way things are for you.
That's interesting. Yeah, now that you said that, it makes sense. Yeah.
I always think of this as people, and I recognize it myself, as you're perfectly normally driving. There's absolutely nothing going on that's strange. But if a cop pulls in behind you, you get a little nervous. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? The cop might stop me. Even, you just don't trust authority in some way. Usually coming from deep in the past. When you were a kid, you couldn't always trust authority. There were reasons for that. So I think that's very interesting, very important. The other thing to think about, it's also a strength, actually, as well as a weakness, because this is where you're caught a little bit, but it's also where you have compassion for others. And to have Chiron at the top of the chart like that is really characteristic of a healer. So we call it the wounded healer, because you have this healing energy about you that really comes partly through your difficult experiences. It can be called also the shamanic path. This is in the sense that you have to remember that you are different, you have your own way to go, just as the shaman in the indigenous cultures goes out of the typical culture and goes to the mountain and has his own experiences, and they might be painful experiences, and comes back down with, he's the one that has the big dreams, he's the one that can, the prophetic dreams, actual dreams, and he's the one that can be of use in that way, that he's got the medicine, he knows beyond. He's not in the typical run-of-the-mill. And so I think that's important for you to recognize also, both with Uranus and with Chiron. In other words, Uranus is also, you've got to go your own way. You're quite an individualist. And then with Chiron, so prominent in your chart, you've had some painful experiences, but these have been formative in the sense that you've learned to look below the surface of things and to see more deeply and to be helpful to people. Does that ring a bell with you?
That's very helpful. That's true.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to mention, and then also I'd like to just mention also that it connects with a couple of the personal planets. Your Chiron is 19.5 degrees. Here's Mercury at 18.5. So now with Chiron and Mercury, you don't always trust your words or your mental process. You're a little bit doubtful, and just helpful, and also it connects over to Venus at 18 degrees here. So that's relationships. So there's a way that you don't always trust relationships. There's a way that you don't always trust your mental process. And it's important, and maybe helpful to you to recognize that you can trust those things. That if you feel that fear coming up, it's maybe nothing but just a fear. And so, it doesn't change your actions. Like you might just go ahead and do what you were doing anyway, which might be to say no or to say, oh, I can't do that or whatever. But still, you just start to notice it. Notice that fear coming up, or that little tinge of a wound that maybe at one point you were put down for your words, and so you always distrust that. You always have this feeling in the back of your mind that maybe you're not good enough to be able to do that. So.
Oh, that's so correct. I have a trust issues. Yeah, that's true. That's interesting.
Isn't it interesting how it shows up in the chart like that? And the great thing is you can work with it. It's something that you can definitely work with as you grow and mature, and keep being aware of it. Mostly just don't try to change anything. Mostly just be aware how that comes up and then comes up again, and then you begin to see the patterns, and then you begin to kind of trust yourself a little bit more, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say about your chart, and I hope that was helpful for you. Did you have any question you wanted to wind up with?
The only question I have, what does when I have Aquarius in the 6th house, what does that mean?
Well, one thing you can say about that is that the ruler, you have Aquarius in the 6th house, but it's not the cusp. The cusp is actually Saturn. So, I'm sorry, not Saturn, but Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So you always want to look to the ruler of the 6th house, but it would be Saturn in this case, not Aquarius, not Uranus.
Okay.
Now, you do have an Aquarius planet, though. You have Venus in Aquarius. Now, Venus in Aquarius is obviously, you are somebody that, I'm sure it can be a little frustrating for guys sometimes, because you got to go your own way, right? It's like sometimes it's just, I'll see you later, because you're doing your own thing. That's where Venus finds friendship and many interests and many pursuits. And so your love of science and knowledge is almost like your love of people. They're all very important. In fact, the kind of guy you'd be attracted to is a guy that's very eclectic that way, very knowledgeable, comes across as a new age kind of person, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So that's
I agree.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess we should move on. I guess I'm getting a signal that we should move on to the next chart.
Okay, we have a lot of volunteers, and
You'll have to pick one.
I saw Juanita's hand come up. So, Juanita, you're on the line with us.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Nice to see you or hear you.
Same here.
So
my birth information is January 22nd, 1947.
Just a sec. Let me get you in.
Okay.
Am I spelling your name right, Juanita, like that?
Yes, you are.
And where were you born again?
Denver, Colorado.
Oh, in Denver. Okay, great. And what's your birthday? I'm sorry.
January 22nd, 1947.
Okay, great. Another Aquarian. This is amazing. We're just getting them right and left here.
At 5:48 a.m.
Okay. Different ways to be Aquarian, of course. Okay, so there's Juanita's chart. And we have patterns in this chart, too. The software indicates that you have a funnel, and the pattern has a leading focus of Saturn. And that's because all your planets really are in this 180 degrees here, mostly in the upper part of the chart. It's an interesting chart you have, Juanita, because, wow, you're a new moon baby just like the first chart we read. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're, of course, in Aquarius this time, but you're another one that really, you kind of really have to go your own way, don't you?
Absolutely.
I always think about new moon babies, I said it before, as somebody that just doesn't want to be told the standard methods. You know, it's like, that this is the office manual, this is the way we do things, and then you're all, no, I'm going to put that aside and figure it out for myself. Thank you very much.
Correct.
And then the other thing to talk about with your chart is, again, Chiron is in the 10th, so those things that I said about Diana's chart is true of you as well, that the authority doesn't always appeal. You have a little suspicion there. Is that right?
That's correct. And I just noticed we had the same placement.
Yeah, that's really cool. To have two charts in a row come up like that out of the placements of Chiron, it could be anywhere. And then the other thing to think about with your chart is also, not only is Saturn the leader of this pattern that includes everything but Uranus, but Saturn is exactly opposite the Sun and Moon. So you're a very strong Saturnian as well. So you have an unusual makeup, because you're both a rebel and you're also very conservative and law-abiding and rule following. So you're somebody that really likes to be late and likes to be not even showing up, but yet you're always on time.
Correct.
So that's kind of does that feel like an odd combination of ingredients?
It doesn't feel odd to me.
No, I guess not. Well, certainly they're both very, very useful. In other words, I believe it's wonderful to be able to see things your own way and to go your own direction. I'm fascinated with that myself in my life. And because you have Chiron at the top of the chart, Chiron's very prominent in your chart, it's in the midst of all of these planets in the upper region of the chart, so you're very comfortable with the public role as well. Especially, you're probably a really good networker. Do you use computer and network and make groups?
I do a lot of networking, yes.
Because Jupiter's there. The other thing to think about with your chart, of course, not to fail to mention, that Uranus is the planet that's outside of that pattern. So that makes Uranus really important. And again, you're an Aquarius, so that also is ruled by Uranus. So you're somebody that really has a very strong Uranian bent. You like to see the future unfolding. You're impatient with the pace of change. You feel like things could be improved upon more quickly. And yet at the same time, it's very good grounding that you have this solid Saturn-Pluto in the 7th, which can be a bit problematic as well, because by being in the 7th, it sometimes gets projected. In other words, you may not always own that ability to make things happen, to be even ruthless if necessary to make things happen. It may be that you project that onto a partner. So you're probably attracted to strong individuals. Am I right about that? Or?
Yes.
And yet they have to be nurturing as well. Why do I say nurturing? Because Cancer is on the descendant. So that's where your other is located, you know, where you project towards the other. So I would say a nurturing person that's also a strong person is just the person that you're interested in. They could be even a little bit ruthless or manipulative with all that Pluto. So that's an interesting
They have been.
So did you have a question now that we've talked in general about your chart, more specifically about your chart?
I'm dabbling in real estate for investments. I just wanted to know if this is a good time for that.
If it's a good time to be doing real estate?
Yeah, for investment.
Oh, I see. How's investments for you? Well, investments, many times we can relate to the 8th house. That's money from investments, or money from other people. And so that would be the sun. And since you have such a strong sun, the sun is with Mercury and it's with the moon, I'd say that this is something that's worked for you in the past. Is that true?
Not really. Not really. This is a new venture.
But has other people's money been a factor for you?
How so?
Well, it could be an inheritance or it could be a partner.
No, not at all.
Okay. I was wrong about that. Well, they say that other people's money in the 8th, you don't have planets in the 8th, but on the other hand, the ruler of the 8th is strongly placed, which is the sun. The other way you could look at investments is to look at the ruler of the 2nd house. And the ruler of the 2nd house would be either Saturn or Uranus, because Aquarius is co-ruled by Saturn. There's not a lot of transits happening to these two positions right now. The transits are actually happening to your Pluto. So I think really there's a lot of transformation going on, which is not the question you asked me about specifically real estate, but I believe that you're in the midst of a big transformation in your life right now. Is that true?
Well, I have Pluto on my ascendant right now. So yes. I'm doing much better, but when it started, it was I'm just coming out of it now, maybe a year, and it was really very challenging.
It's really a death and rebirth.
Yes, exactly.
Not only that, but Pluto is getting to the point where it will make an inconjunct from, it's in Capricorn, of course, Pluto transiting, and it will get over to the 12th degree. In fact, in May of next year, 13 is where the square between Pluto and Uranus is going to hit your chart. So I think that's a pretty big time. So it seems like that will go on for a year, that you're in the midst of big change. So I think
but for the better now, because at the beginning it wasn't.
Oh, I think it definitely, well, it will still be intense, but I think you're getting your sea legs.
Okay.
So you have to learn to live with it, and to see what it's about, see what it has to tell you. I think it's important to not duck it. You know, that when we have big transits, sometimes we have to just recognize that that's what's going on, that life is upside down, and that there may be a reason for that. Maybe there was accumulated changes that were necessary. That's what I feel about that.
Exactly, but I mean, I've gone through the worst part of it, I believe. Do you agree with that?
I think you've gone through the worst part in the sense that when it starts, it's always very difficult, because how do I deal with this? And now you're learning how to deal with it. But I don't think it's over. No, I don't think it's over. I think it's good to recognize that there's still more to come. May of next year is going to be a very intense time in that regard, because that's when it's hitting your Pluto, which means, but I still say you can navigate it. It's just you have to be aware that there's stuff to deal with. That make sense?
Yeah. That's not what I wanted to hear, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have better news about rosiness, but I think it's good to recognize that you can always get on top of it. You know, Yogananda was the one who said that there's no astrological aspect. He was a believer in astrology. There's no astrological aspect that you cannot surmount with your own energy and your own willpower. You know, the human is different than the chart. You always have your human choices, and you can get above it, and it's character building if you let it be and if you have the right attitude toward it. That's what I believe. So I hope that was helpful. We do have to move on.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome, Juanita. Nice to meet you. In Juanita's chart, Saturn is retrograde, which is not a big deal. And so is Pluto. It's important to recognize that when inner planets are retrograde, and she doesn't have those, that is a definite determination of a different way of the planet manifesting. But with Saturn, it's retrograde half the year. So it's just kind of normal for Saturn to be retrograde. It doesn't mean as much for the outer planets. It's just kind of what they do. They do it whenever the Earth actually moves past in its orbit. So when the Earth represented by the opposite point from the Sun, because it's getting a little technical, but opposite the Sun, you always have the Earth. So here's the Earth around here somewhere moving past her Saturn, and the Earth moves faster, so these planets are going to be in retrograde, these planets over this way. All these planets are retrograde. So she has outer planet retrogrades, but that's very common, and it doesn't really change the meaning of the chart. So do we have a volunteer?
We do. Pamela, you had your hand up.
Yes. Am I on the line?
Yes, you are.
You are.
Wonderful. Okay. My birthday is July 13th.
Well, let me get your name in here first.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
So, Pamela, like that?
Right.
And where were you born?
You're going to love this. Sylacauga, Alabama.
How do you spell it?
Sylacauga, and then A-L.
And then A-L?
Yeah, for
Oh,
Alabama.
Alabama. Okay, got it. I see. It's Alabama. Okay, well, you're right. That's a new one. I don't think I've ever been to Sylacauga.
Most people have not. Nor have I for a very long time.
And where are you living now?
I live in Birmingham.
Oh, okay. And how about your birthday?
It's 7/13, 1944.
Okay.
And the birth time listed is 6 a.m. Central Time. It was wartime, but, there's some question about that through the years when I've had charts done, as it was a small clinic, and who knows if that was really the ideal, the exact time of my birth.
They were on wartime and throughout 44, and it was summer as well. So I think that's probably accurate. So let's go with that anyway. That's certainly the way the chart would come up for any of the software. So actually being born at 6 a.m., your sun is very close to the ascendant. It was below the horizon, so being not quite, by daylight time, 6 a.m. was pretty early still, even for the summer. So it was still dark, but it was about to be sunrise, and you had the characteristic of having the sun right on the ascendant, which you would also do a solar chart that same way. So that's very interesting. It means that you're strong in yourself. You're a double Cancer in that regard, but you're a double Cancer with an Aries moon, so that's different. So the moon is the ruler of the rising sign, but the sun is also rising. So you could say the sun is the ruler of your chart, or you could say the moon is the ruler of your chart, either way. So when you say the ruler of the chart, that really means what is the prominent planet of the chart, where do we look for important aspects that are things that are changing, that are changeable in the chart. And I would say the sun is actually more so, because the sun is close to the ascendant, because the sun is accompanied by both Venus and the North Node. You're very strong in yourself. Your sense of self has always been right there. Is that true?
It is.
And then again, it's also your destiny, because when we talk about destiny, the South Node and the North Node are very important to that. So here's the South Node over here in the 7th, and here is the North Node in the 1st. So having the North Node in the 1st means that this is important, as well as kind of a natural way of being, because of the sun being there. It's important for you in this life to learn to move away from depending on other people. And that gets back to the moon. So go ahead.
Well, that has definitely happened.
Learned. So that's great. And then let's see, what else would you like to know about your chart? Do you have a question that goes along with your volunteering?
Well, the moon in the 10th house, I'm given to understand that has to do with occupation.
Well, you're very good with the public. You can work well with the public. In fact, that's probably what you do. Is that something you have gotten into?
Yes, my life has pretty much been with dealing with lots of people. But on the other hand, I'm a very private person. I'm sort of an extroverted introvert. Does that show in my chart?
That makes sense. Well, you have these planets above the horizon, which is the extroverted nature, and the moon in the 10th is career-wise. You can use your personality in work, and you can also be very clear that working with the public is not a problem. You just have that talent. That's your ability. With Cancer rising, you're also a very private person in general, and your emotions show. So I would say you probably have to struggle, since you do work with people, you probably have to struggle. If you're having a bad day, everybody kind of knows it, right?
Yeah.
That's you have to put the armor on, and it doesn't come naturally to you because Saturn's in the 12th. So, Saturn is something that doesn't come super easy to you. It's something that you have to kind of work towards. And the other thing you're working towards in this lifetime is getting really, really close connected to your own process. I mean, your private self is very important, so don't disregard that. Don't say, gee, I wish I was more of a public person, because learning who you are at deep levels is really what it's all about for you.
And in my sun, then, is it actually in the 2nd house or the 1st house?
Well, your sun or your... No, I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
The sun, is that on the ascendant?
Oh, I
is
see
that
what you're saying. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. Yes, the fact that the sun is at 20 degrees, it really is a 12th house element. So the sun, if we were to look at the point where it sits, here's the mark for it right here. The sun sits in the 12th house, but because it's so close to the ascendant, we consider that a first house element. So what I've said about you being so sure of yourself really comes from the sun and the ascendant being conjunct. We're going to have to close and move on because of the timing. I'm just watching the time.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and it's really nice to talk to you.
You as well.
Okay. Well, I just want to say a couple of things in closing. We can leave Pamela's chart up while I do. Thank you for volunteering, by the way, Pamela. It's very much appreciated that you allow your chart to be seen by everybody. What I wanted to say is I think it's obvious that astrology does give you a lot, and the question is, what can you do with it yourself? And of course, being able to read these charts, the software creates charts. My software does, other software does as well, or you've had your chart done, you've seen your charts. So what we're about in this series that we're planning to do, I've been asked to teach quite a bit, and I finally agreed to it, and this is the format that we decided on. We're going to see how this webinar format works. We're going to have a limit on the class size so that people can get a lot of attention, and we can even do one-on-one work with each other. And you know, what I think is so important about astrology is that it does reveal the way in which we do not live in a materialistic world. I alluded to at the beginning that astrology works, which is quite amazing, and yet astrology doesn't depend on cause and effect. So I think it just indicates that we live in a magical universe. It's really important to recognize that. And I think that's one way out of the trap that we're in right now in this world. There's a big materialistic focus now, as everybody can recognize. You know, the problems are people are just not working with each other. They're not returning to spirit in their dealings with each other. And I think that astrology is one way that we can open those doors, since the old standards of religious beliefs are kind of in the past. They don't seem to fit with the modern world. This is one way that we can demonstrate that, yes, there is spirit afoot in the world, and I think it's so important. So I hope you're interested in learning more about working with charts, and that's what this course is going to be about. Of course, astrology can tell you where you're going in life, what your goals really should be according to the chart, which is not to replace your own understanding of where you should be in life, but it does give you more information. It does help. And knowing what you're supposed to be doing, I think, is the secret of life. So, and getting meaning out of finding your niche, being the very best person you can be of who you are, finding who you are and how to be the very best one of you that you can be. So I'm hopeful that this will be useful to people to learn more about reading charts. And in order to do that, we've outlined a course. And I think you can see the, let's see, there's a URL we're going to give them, right, Asia? Mm-hmm. So the URL will give you the outline. And then now I wanted to mention that I've been using all my skills as an astrologer after 30 years when I read charts. So you know, it may seem complex, but it's not going to be as complex at the beginning when we start talking about charts. Here's Edgar Casey, for example. So learning how to read this map is what we're going to do, and we're going to start by just the basic building blocks. So the first, you probably should be able to follow along on the URL if you have it up on your screen. The first week, we've just talked about the building blocks: signs, houses, planets, and aspects. And you know, there's going to be 6 90-minute sessions, so we'll have time to get into all this and begin to first of all just talk about it, and then answer questions about it, and then start to work with it yourself using your own chart. And one thing is, you will have the basic edition of the TimePassages software, which is what you're seeing here, what I've been demonstrating with, where you can actually click on things and get meanings. Like you can click on the Uranus in the first house. We've had a lot of Uranus and a lot of Aquarius in this session, and you can get information about that. I think that's so fascinating with Edgar Casey. He has Uranus right on the ascendant. And he was very psychic, as you know. So the first class of the building blocks: signs, houses, planets, and aspects, including elements of fire, water, air, and earth. including cardinal, fixed, and mutable, which defines the 12 signs. Degrees, how does astrology work with degrees? How does astrology work itself? What the principles are. We go into the principle of synchronicity and the philosophical implications of that a little bit more. And how the planets are connected is the aspects. I talked about that a little bit when I was looking at people's charts. Some other things if we can have time to get into them. And then in week 2, we're going to go further into natal charts, talking about the planetary patterns in the charts, talking about the way to get into the chart, using a couple of exemplars, Alan Oken and Richard Eidemann, who both talked about these processes so that you can see how do you start reading a particular chart, where are you going to go for it. And then we're going to talk about transits in week 3, which is very important, and that's timing. That's how the chart evolves over time, how the planets are in the sky relative to the chart. So things are related to that, transiting planets, and how they relate back to the natal chart and the planet that's in the natal chart that's transiting in the outer sky. New moons and full moons and eclipses and yads, patterns that are in the sky as well as in the natal. And then in the 4th week, we're talking about progressions, so the timing of progressions, which is another way to see the chart evolve over time. Both solar arc and secondary progressions we'll cover, and maybe tertiary if we get into that. The progressed ascendant, freestanding progress chart, and the patterns of that chart, and then the chart relocation. So then also, in weeks 5 and 6, we're going to be, by this time, more experienced with the charts. And what we'll be doing is working with each other and making practice groups, and finally getting to more advanced tools and exploring issues as we have time for them and as questions come up for them. Things like graphical ephemeris or other ways of looking at the transits over time and how they can look at a whole range of time, like the transiting hit list of the year that's coming up, as well as, if we have time, the solar return chart. So, and then we'll be handling questions and making it very interactive. We want to allow people to work with each other in groups, and we also want to make sure that there's plenty of one-on-one time. We'll use the webcams in that case, and we'll be able to talk to each other and actually have chats and conversations just as though we were in a real classroom. So are there any questions that people might have? You can press 1 on your phone if you have a question about the course, that is, about how the course is going to be laid out.
Yes, we do have a hand up, and it looks like Lucy, you have a question. You're on the line.
Hi, thank you. I had to hang up a little bit earlier because the reception was really bad and I couldn't hear. So, is there going to be any written information to explain the course? Because I got into it sort of towards the end part. So, is there something going to be an itinerary or something like that?
Yes. Well, did you see the URL? There's a URL that probably came up on your screen there. Did you just get back on the second?
No, not the second.
Okay.
You mean the URL where it says the chat, or where? Which one? I have like a thing that says chat, host to all. Where should I look?
Oh, the actual URL is on our site. So it's astrograph.com/webinar/course, COURSE. And that gives the outline of the course.
Okay, I'll check it out then. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, we just did cover that, what we're going to be doing. Were there any other questions out there about how the course is going to be laid out or what we're going to be doing? Or the difficulty level? I mean, I know that people have asked before about how difficult is this, and we're really trying to make it as easy as possible, because my goal is to try to get everybody to be able to look at this strange map and to be able to just recognize what's in it and see certain things and be able to start practicing astrology with your own chart and with other people's charts as well, be able to understand what that has to tell you.
Sue Thompson. Sue, you also had your hand up. You're on the line.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What is the price for the course that I didn't catch?
Oh, okay. I think we're going to cover that in a minute, actually. You're anticipating the next section. Actually, why don't you go ahead and, Claire, and give the logistics for the course.
Okay. I'd love to.
Why don't you go ahead and push your webcam so you're up on, yeah, there you go.
Here I am. Okay, what a great call. Thank you, Henry. That was so informative. I know that we all love being here with you today, and I am going to give everyone a little bit more details, the nitty-gritty, about how the course is going to work. So just as Sue was just asking, the class is going to be a 6-week class that'll be running on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So that's going to be 5 p.m. Eastern. And it's going to start on January 9th, 2014, and run through February 13th. Each class is going to have 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A with Henry. So you'll be able to, again, like today, raise your hand, ask individual questions that you have coming up. And you'll also get the MP4 downloads of each class as well as transcripts. And an amazing gift that Henry is bringing to this class for you is that you'll also get his flagship software that we were using today, TimePassages, which is the software that generates the charts that we were looking at and all the details that come with that. And that's going to be the basic edition of TimePassages, which itself is usually $49.95, but that's going to be included in the course for you. And if you sign up by October 15th, you're going to get the early bird pricing for this course, and which is $297. So that's an awesome value to get to work with Henry and get so much one-on-one time and individual attention, and to also work with each other in this class. And the price on that is going to go up to $397 at midnight on the 15th. So if you know that you want to join us, then this is the time. Go ahead and get that early bird pricing. So we know that there were over 500 people that signed up for this course today to join us for the call, who are going to, either you were here with us live or you'll be able to see the replay. So we'd want to make sure that you know that we are keeping this course small, and we're only offering, so we're going to be closing the door on that once we get 70 people, because we really want to ensure that everyone gets a chance to interact with Henry and get their questions answered, and it stays a little bit more intimate. Another thing that you're going to get when you join the course is that we're going to have a Facebook group that's just for people in the course. And that way, any time of night or day, you'll be able to get on that and to share any realizations you're having, any questions, things that are coming up, and connect with other people who are starting to study astrology and who are, like-minded community that are all working with us. And we don't know if Henry is actually going to do this again live. It probably will be available as a product later, but to have the live interaction with him, this is the time, because he's not sure if he's going to do it live again. So you get that really great benefit of practicing with other people and getting Henry's attention in real time. So I think those are about all the details for the class. Henry, they can go ahead and sign up right there in the link that we sent them. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the course in January.
Yeah, it's been good for me to be able to leverage my knowledge a little bit wider, and I really do feel that astrology is one way out of the current trap that we're in. I guess I made that obvious in my earlier statements, but I just feel like it's not only a great method, a great path to self-knowledge, but it really opens doors to recognize that really the materialistic worldview is only a small part of what's really going on. So few people realize that, and it's hard to get that information across without having something concrete to point to. So that's why I like astrology so well, that its self-evident truth is really, if you think about it, conceals a great mystery. Because just as Jung found in the early part of the 20th century, there's a lot more going on in the human soul than is normally able to be recognized at the surface. And so I think it's really important that we that we have in these modern times, new models of spirit to take us forward into the 21st century, which is challenging in the extreme, as we all can tell. Not only can we navigate the timings of these times a little bit better, we can also have a way of falling back on something really profound and truth-telling, that spirit is alive and well, and spirit is afoot in the world. And so I really think this is an important opportunity to connect, whether you take the course or not. I just want to get the message out there that astrology works, and that it's fascinating that it does, because it's so revealing. So thanks very much for joining us on the call. I really appreciate it. And if you have further questions about the course, you can also email support@astrograph.com, which is the support number for our software products, and we'll be able to tell you more information. Thanks a lot. See you guys later.